And welcome to the first of a series of 3 regional stakeholder events for Electricity North West. My name's Ilona Alcock. I'm the director of Elevate, which is a business development consultancy working across the north of England. We're super passionate about sustainability, innovation and community, which means events like this are absolutely our sweet spot. And what we love about working with Electricity North West is not just all of the amazing work that they do, but that real dedication to bringing that out to businesses, community organisations, and making sure that you all have a voice. So on that note, we want to hear your voice. You will hopefully see there is a chat box next to where you're watching this video, and we would love it if you could just drop in that chat box to let us know who you are, what organisation you're representing, and whereabouts geographically you're based. We are live streaming from T-Bay today, and it's delightful that we've been able to come right up to Cumbria to do that, but we would love to know where you're going to be as well. To give you a little bit of an overview of what to expect, we have got a lot crammed in to the next couple of hours. I'm going to introduce a wide range of speakers to share their expertise, but all the way through, we want to hear your questions and we will be coming back to pick all those up at the end. So as you can see, we're going to cover Electricity North West's performance. We're going to talk about COVID and the green recovery. We're going to take a regional view with Angela Jones from Cumbria County Council. We're going to touch on net zero and then the business plan for the year ahead. Throughout all of that, we want to hear your views. If you've not got your joining email to hand, if your inbox is anything like mine, it might well not be. Please do go on to menti.com or download the app. We are going to continue giving those instructions throughout the session, but we're going to keep canvassing your views. So please have a look at that now. We are going to drop the instructions into the chat box so that you know exactly what you're going to be doing. So that's enough from me to start. I'm now going to hand over to Paul Bircham from Electricity North West, who's going to give you an overview of their performance.
Hi everybody, and thank you to Ilona. Great to be able to speak to so many people today and to explain to you what's going on in Electricity North West and to think about the future. And we're really keen to get your views to help us develop our plans. Electricity North West is distributing electricity across the North West region. We're spending about £1 million every day making the electricity network more reliable, more efficient, and improving its capacity to connect everybody across the North West. And stakeholder engagement is absolutely vital to us. It's key to improving our business, to understanding what our customers need from us, and to helping us plan for the future. So all of these events are geared to improve our business and help us deliver what you require of us. And we've been doing an enormous amount of stakeholder engagement recently. In the last couple of years, we've really ramped up all of our engagement. We've had more than 22,000 interactions with more than 18,000 different people. And the real drive for that is to ensure that as we plan and think about our business plan between 2023 and 2028, that 5-year period, which we call Rio ED2, that plan is really delivering what everybody in the Northwest needs of us. So that is what is driving everything we've been doing, and that has led to us being able to publish a draft business plan for that period, and we're refining that now to get to a final plan. And I'll be back later to talk to you about that a little bit more as we go forward. Now, we are going to use Menti to get your views today, and what we'd like to do is a little bit of a warm-up on that straight away to see that people have the functionality to give us their views and to get you practiced in participating in our polling. So first question we'd like to ask everybody is, what type of stakeholder are you? And we've got a number of different characterizations across the board here in the poll. So if you could go into the poll, use Menti and let us know who you are or what type of stakeholder you think you are, that would be great. And hopefully we'll start to see people popping, we see some results popping in there. That's great. So far, one person has worked out how to use Dementi, or that is the entirety of my audience today. So let's hopefully get a few more bits of feedback in there. And we're just waiting to see. The local authority engagement is strong today so far. So we've got 4 people using Menti and letting us know they've come from local authorities, 1 environmental charity or representative. That's great. I'm going to wait a little bit longer to see as people get used to this and we get the little bit of polling lag, but it's coming through now. Results are coming through. That's brilliant. And there'll be more people joining the poll as we go forward and joining the event so that we get lots of views as we go on. But I think we'll move on to the second question now. And where are you joining us from today? Or what area do you represent? So hopefully we're going to get loads of people from Cumbria. But Electricity North West also serves everybody in Lancashire and everybody in Greater Manchester as well, as you saw from my first map. And we are doing events in all of these regions. It's been brilliant to travel up to Cumbria this morning and enjoy the fabulous Cumbrian weather. I'm sure everybody's finding it a great day today. So mainly Cumbria and a few others. That's brilliant. So everybody vote on that one. And we'll also look onto the final practice question this morning. How often do we engage with you? So we have, as I've been saying, been doing an enormous amount of engagement over the last few years. We've been trying to do this for many years now, but we've really been ramping it up, and we've found it so beneficial, so useful to help us develop our business today as well as for the future. That this is something that we're looking to perpetuate. This level of engagement has been very powerful for the business, something that everybody in the business has really enjoyed, and we're looking to continue this level of engagement. So it's really interesting to see how many people are new to this, never contacted Electricity North West before, and how people are regularly in contact with us. It'll be interesting to see how many people from our regular contacts are using this event today, and how many people who are new are coming into this environment. So we can see this starting to change now. Quite a few people with occasional contact, quite a few people in regular contact, and some new people. So great to have new people seeing some of our events and understanding some of our stakeholder engagement. So a really big welcome to everybody who's new, and hopefully you'll find lots of benefit from the presentation today. So I think that's our first survey over, and great introduction.
Wonderful. Thanks ever so much, Paul. And yeah, just to reiterate, thanks again to all of you for engaging with that poll. I appreciate there is a lot of information on these slides. I know a couple of you mentioned in the chat that the text is quite small. When we get on to the full round of questions later, there will just be 2 sets of answers. So we'll make sure that we read all of those out for you as well. But as Paul says, great to see some new faces in the audience. Those of you who are from areas outside those 3 regions would again be great. Just pop in the chat and let us know where you're from. Really keen to get a sense of who's in the room, as it were, and listening to us. So thanks again, Paul. And next up, we have Clive, who's going to go into a little bit more detail around Electricity North West performance and what they've been up to over the last couple of years.
Hello, so I'm going to take some time this morning to talk you through our operational performance and our commitments to our customers. Okay, as an essential service provider, our performance is closely monitored by our industry regulator, Ofgem. And what they do, they give us a red, amber, green rating on a series of key performance indicators. And they cover a range of activities from reliability of our network through to customer satisfaction, our impact on the environment, and of course safety. And that's safety both of the general public and of our own workforce. Now, we're really pleased to note that for the last 3 years, we have consistently had a green rating on all of the Ofgem indicators. And a green rating means that our performance is on or exceeding target. And a particular source of pride within our organisation is the fact that out of all the distribution network operator groupings, we're the only grouping who've achieved that green rating consistently for the last 3 years. Okay, so that's at a high level. That's underpinned though by a series of business plan commitments. Now, these business plan commitments were enshrined in our Rio ED1 plan back in 2015. And they're essentially, at that time, 40 promises to our customers. And they were informed by what our stakeholders told us were absolutely essential areas for our customers. What we'll do on an annual basis, we'll review our performance against those commitments with our stakeholder groups, and we refine them, we amend them, and you know what? We add to them as well. For this year, we've now got up to 48 commitments to report on. And out of those 48 commitments, 45 of those commitments are either on target, ahead of target, or completed already. The 3 remaining targets are ongoing and will be completed and put in place by the end of the period at the end of the ED1 period. And at that point, we'll go again, get some new targets and set off again. Okay, let's just take some time to have a look at how the electricity network has developed over the years. And at one point, I started my career back in the late 80s. And in the late 80s, the world was much simpler. Electricity was generated in a number of large electricity generating stations, typically fired by coal, by oil, or powered by nuclear power. And power flowed in one direction, right through, down through the voltage levels, feeding customers on the way. Today, if we look at it now, 35 years later, the world's a very different place. The source of generation includes a lot of renewables, and that comes with its own challenge of intermittency, as a lot of it can be weather dependent. And customers use electricity in very different ways. For instance, I charged my EV today on a fast charger, taking 45 kilowatts, with 5 other people doing the same, all at exactly the same point in time. People use heat pumps to warm their own homes, and we have distributed generation all the way through the network, connecting at different points. The challenge now is balancing supply and demand in a dynamic way. And our role has changed from being a pure distribution network, the orchestra, rather than the lead violin player. Right, let's just have a look locally at what the electricity network looks like in the Cumbrian area. And what you'll see then in the diagram is essentially a large, heavy, dark ring. And that's what we refer to as the Cumbria ring. It's 132,000 volt ring, largely of tower line construction surrounding the national park. And power is taken off at either 33 kV or 11 kV to feed smaller towns, villages, and transforming down to low voltage. If you ask me to characterize what the Cumbrian network looks like, what I would be visualizing is essentially wood pole network, overhead line, lots of high voltage lines, lots of low voltage lines, pole mounted transformers. That's what I'd be visualizing. That's exposed to the elements and brings its own challenge, both in terms of the geographical distributed nature of Cumbria, but also in the fact that it is open to the elements. And as a result of that, you'll see a greater proliferation now of automated devices out on the network to help us get supplies back on quickly. Right, electricity is very much woven into the fabric of our customers' everyday lives now. And it's essential, therefore, more now than ever, that our supply is reliable. What we do to ensure that our supply is reliable, we ensure that through a system of inspections, through routine maintenance. As a result of the inspections, that informs our programs of replacement and refurbishments. And we also, for times when the network does go wrong, we fit automation to get customers back on supply quickly. For the cases that the automation don't cover, we invest in the training, in the capability, and the flexibility of our own workforce to get out there and get the lines up quickly or repair switchgear, etc. The regulator monitors our performance with regard to our reliability, and they monitor that via two key measures: customer interruptions and customer minutes lost. And you can see from the charts there that over the last 9 years or so, our performance on both customer interruptions and customer minutes lost has improved by between 30 and 40%. Okay, to bring some of that to life now, it's been a nightmare of a year for all of us, hasn't it? Despite that, we've continued to innovate with regards to supply reliability. If I can pick out of this list just 2 or 3 items that I think would be relevant to the Cumbrian area. So, as a result of climate change, what we're seeing now is trees growing faster, and a lot of those trees are close to our overhead lines. So what we're running is an enhanced vegetation management program where we'll make sure that trees and blowing branches in wind don't interfere with our network. That's with regard to reliability, but also customer safety. As we get to this time of year, being ready for the winter is absolutely essential for us. We're starting to monitor wind speeds and impending lightning very quickly, and we're looking 5 days ahead typically. Tomorrow we're predicting winds of 50 miles an hour in the Cumbrian area. We will resource up accordingly. And probably the most exciting development that will impact in the Cumbria area on this slide is our line site initiative. So that's a £4 million programme where we're working with a technology partner to trial some fault location equipment that'll be spread out on our overhead line network. It's a series of sensors, and that will inform us if we see an impending overhead line that's lower than it should be, or perhaps a failing insulator. The concept there being getting to issues before they happen. That will also really help us in storm situations to get us to deploy our resource where it's needed appropriately. Now, another impact of climate change has been the greater instances of flooding. And I'm sure you'll all remember 2015, we were subject to Storm Desmond. So in our ED1 plan, we nominated 46 of our major substation sites that needed flood mitigation work. So when I say flood mitigation work, that can typically be raising assets. We've built substations at raised platforms, often as much as 3 meters high. We'll put pumps in basements, seal ducts, and have barriers around, physical barriers around substations. Looking back to Desmond, some of the sites that were really impacted, Carlisle really suffered. So we lost Carlisle grid, where supplies come in at 132 kV. And we also lost an associated primary substation at Willowholme, and saw some issues at Appleby and Kendal as well. So what we've done at Carlisle grid, that control room now that controls the protection equipment, protecting our major assets, is now 3 meters on stilts. Customers are absolutely at the heart of everything we do. And you can see from the graph there, our customer satisfaction score has improved year on year. We drive that customer satisfaction score by simplifying our processes, driving compliance, and then also using technology and social media where appropriate. One of the main interventions this year has been we've commissioned a new telephony platform, which we call our Storm system, and we've introduced that just in the last month to be coincident with our introduction of our new control system, NMS, or Network Management System. And we see those two together as being a major platform for future improvements. Now, some of our customers need our help much more than others. And for that reason, we have what we call our Priority Services Register. We currently have 900,000 customers registered on that Priority Services Register. And what we're looking to do there is arrange tailored support for those customers, whatever their needs may be. Now, we'll facilitate that through relationships with about 100 trusted partners. Now, those partners, they'll provide that support to the customers, and they could include charities or local housing associations. As we got that established, we then realized small businesses also have special needs, and we've introduced a business priority services register as well, building on the platform that we'd already established with the PSR. Our stakeholders told us that one of the main areas to focus on moving forward is vulnerability of customers. And so recently we introduced a new business plan commitment centered on vulnerability. And this is really targeting helping those customers to avoid the hazards of fuel poverty. What we've done, we've got a partnership with Citizens Advice, and in that partnership, we're providing £250,000 per annum funding to recruit specialist energy advisors to give those customers the services that they need to avoid fuel poverty. That can be energy efficiency advice, financial assistance, and referrals to other trusted partners as appropriate. I think we're all well aware of the current climate emergency, and our role as distribution system operator puts us very much at the fulcrum of building on low carbon technology, bringing that, facilitating the connection to the network. In 2018, back then, we introduced 3 new commitments, carbon commitments, and that recognises the leading role that we play to paving the way to that net zero future. So things we're looking at doing, those 3 commitments: driving the transition to the DSO, enabling the connection of electric vehicles. We never want our network to be the reason that people can't adopt low carbon technology, and also facilitating and encouraging the connection of community and local energy. In parallel with that, we launched our programme to lead the Northwest to net zero, and that includes a £63 million commitment to decarbonise our own business, but to inspire and enable other businesses to do exactly the same. And as part of that, we've delivered year-on-year carbon emission reductions, reducing ours by 42% since 2015. Trying to bring some of this to life, we've deployed our smart street technology, which essentially consists of voltage optimization on our high voltage to low voltage substations. What that does, it enables us to avoid the need for reinforcement in certain cases as low carbon technology grows in an area. More importantly, it can reduce voltage and thereby save customers money off their bills. In terms of our own workforce, we've rolled out carbon literacy training. We're now using electric mini diggers in a number of our depots, and we've set 2 of our depots up as exemplar net zero depots, and we're doing a similar thing on substations to show our customers and business partners what can be achieved. We've also made it easy for colleagues to adopt low carbon technology in terms of driving electric vehicles. We've done that by having charging in all of our depots, putting lots more electric cars on the car schemes, and helping people to install chargers at home. Looking outside the organisation towards our infrastructure investment, one of the main things that we're rolling out in the future is low voltage monitoring. So we're working with a technology partner again to roll out 4,000 pre-sense units, and what they do, they monitor voltage, they monitor load on the low voltage network and look for emerging issues to ensure that we will do reinforcement as and when appropriate to support the growth of low carbon technology. In terms of the regional green recovery, up in the Cumbrian area, a big chunk of that investment is targeted at enabling fast chargers, particularly at motorway service stations. So on Friday, I was out with our design team on an engagement visit, and we drove the 10-kilometre proposed cable route for a major HV reinforcement scheme from our North Carlisle bulk supply point to West Linton primary substation, and that will enable a connection to be made to serve fast vehicle chargers up at North Carlisle services. So as I was talking to the designer out on that project, we were both of a similar vintage, and we talked about our journey through from starting with the industry to where we are now. And I think we both agreed that we're proud of our heritage, focusing on what's in front of us now. We're very excited by the future. Thanks for letting me share this with you.
Thanks ever so much there. And fair to say, a very, very busy few years you've had there, and so many different moving parts, different stakeholders. And it just goes to show how important events like this are, to make sure that all of those different organisations who are involved in that plan have the opportunity to feed back, and to see changes already being implemented as a result of that is really exciting. We're now going to move on to Rachel, who's going to pick up on two of the kind of key themes, not just that Electricity North West has been dealing with, but as a country and indeed as a globe. She's going to focus on the COVID response and the green recovery.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about what Electricity North West's response to the COVID pandemic has been, not only for our colleagues, but also for our customers and our communities, and also share with you a little bit of information around what the green recovery is as we come out of the COVID pandemic, and how we will look to a future better, learning what we have experienced through the pandemic. So in terms of what we did as an organisation, firstly for our colleagues, quite quick on into the pandemic, we identified that we were going to be classed as critical workers, which meant that we had a big hill to climb in terms of how do we ensure that all of our colleagues could be kept safe and be operate in a COVID secure way, so that we can continue to run the essential service that we provide for our customers, and ensure that all the people in the Northwest that were working from home or working in organisations could have electricity in their homes and support their home life balance with things like homeschooling as well. So 50% of our colleagues started to work from home immediately. So we had a big task to get all those colleagues set up in a way that they could operate from home. The other half of the organisation was operating in a business as usual capacity, but equally with conscious that we had to make sure that they were operating in a safe way. So introducing new rules and procedures for things like social distancing and the use of masks, hand sanitisers. It was a massive experience to go through to make sure that all those colleagues that we had could be kept safe, and also to deal with some of the fears and concerns that they had. Importantly, we worked very strongly with our trade union partners. We were very lucky position that our 4 trade unions supported us on our journey. So throughout the pandemic, we worked on a weekly basis, hearing directly from our trade unions and from our colleagues to understand what did they need to help them to feel safe in their work, and what actually were we hearing from what colleagues were sharing about what did customers want as well, because our colleagues were frontline with our customers, and so we had a direct in to hear about what was needed to help support us. The key to this from my perspective was actually it was around communication. So we very importantly did a lot of communications with our colleagues. We did things like mental health surveys to ensure that we were hearing back, because at a time which actually a lot of social media coverage around the impact upon people's mental well-being. As an organisation, we decided to lead very heavily on this and sought to get feedback and put in lots of infrastructure in place to support colleagues. So on a regular basis, we were sending out comms in terms of how can we signpost support and help to colleagues, and that was also passed on to our customers as well. So as an organisation, we did a lot to make sure that we were operating in a business usual capacity, but first and foremost, that could only be done by making sure that colleagues were kept safe. Once we'd done that, we were able then to think about what could we do to immediately start responding to the needs of our customers as well. So here you can see there's a lot of information about actually what was Electricity North West's COVID response to not only our colleagues, but also to our customers and our communities. And actually, how did our colleagues also help to support customers as well? So we're very proud that our colleagues quickly engaged in terms of what could we do. We did a lot of volunteering with food banks and local charities, which I'll talk to you about in more detail in a minute. We also did a lot of communications, extra communications with our customers. We saw an increase in the volume of calls coming through to our contact centres. And so we quite quickly had to mobilise to understand what did we need to do to support our customers at this very worrying time as at the height of the pandemic. So going into detail now about what we did with our communities and our customers. So we are proud that we have a lot of connections in our communities, which is a lot of work that we do through our stakeholder engagement to understand what's required. So one of the key things that we did was working with our strategic partners who are out in our communities to understand what we could do to help those partnerships to work in a better way to support customers. An example of this is one of the charities that we worked with called the Bread and Butter Thing, which is a charity that's set up to help families on low incomes and to deliver food to those families. Our colleagues at Electricity North West were involved in delivering those food bank parcels. So not only were they doing their job, their business as usual job, they were also in their own time going out and volunteering. And we also set up rotas so that they could do that during work time as well. We helped out with other food banks and set up strategic partnerships so that we could understand what was required of our customers so we could have targeted support. More specific details and examples are we helped support up the setup of the Nightingale Hospital in Manchester by ensuring that there was enough electricity supply to help with the network there, and also that there was a reserve supply should that hospital be called upon. We also worked with businesses that were in the helping with the COVID-19 pandemic, such as manufacturers of PPE, to ensure that they were aware that we could support them should they have any issues with their electricity supply. And one of the really important things that we did to help with customers in vulnerable circumstances was we led the way with an emergency top-up voucher scheme, which was to help customers who were on prepayment meters and were struggling with getting supply of the vouchers that were required. And so we provided support for those customers so that there wasn't anybody who was in a situation who couldn't be without electricity during the pandemic. So we learned a lot as an organisation as we went through the early days, and we still continue to learn as we're going through the pandemic. And a lot of what we've learned is helping to shape the business as it goes forward in terms of what we can do to continue to work in this area. It's through our stakeholder advisory panel that have supported us to hear, well, what do we need to do more? And we've heard that volunteering is certainly of key importance, and we take that very importantly as an organisation. We've heard as well that we need to increase support for Fuel Pure customers, where the example of the top-up voucher is a good example of how we can continue to work in that space. So not only have we had opportunity through the pandemic to do a lot for our customers and for our colleagues and our communities, but it's also helped to shape our thinking as we go forward, as we're planning for the next pricing period within the electricity industry. We've had a key opportunity to have a window onto what is really important for customers and what's important for our stakeholders. So moving forward in terms of what's the next steps as we come out of the COVID pandemic, we're focusing on kickstarting what's called the green recovery. And the green recovery is where the government and Ofgem have worked together to understand how can we build back better and help the economy with the lens of the green angle from working towards a carbon neutral target. We heard from Clive earlier on how Electricity North West has a programme to help lead the North West to carbon zero. And what we've done is entered into a consultation to hear around what's important as part of that green recovery. The key strands that have come through from that are the consultation has highlighted that it's really important that we have the right infrastructure in place to be able to support our customers and our communities with regards to an increased volume in use of low carbon technologies. An obvious example of this is the use of electric vehicles. We heard from Clive just now how he was out even last week looking at a new piece of work that's been put in place as an infrastructure of how we can increase the charging points upon motorway services so that more customers can actually engage and use electric vehicles. We've also looked at what can we do to help domestic customers in their own houses. We hear that often one of the main barriers to having, for example, an electric vehicle is the concern about where I would charge my electric vehicle. Electricity North West have done a lot of work into understanding what those challenges are. And one of the key areas of work as part of the green recovery is looking at the unlooping of domestic properties. Quite a technical term, but in essence what that means is quite often domestic properties are looped into another service, which affects the capacity of domestic properties to be able to charge their electric vehicles. Electricity North West are investing heavily into how to help those domestic customers. They can be unlooped from that service, which allows for everybody on that street, therefore, to have enough electricity to be able to charge their electric vehicles. So it's very forward thinking, but allows us to focus on what are the positive aspects that come through from the COVID pandemic, and how can we all be part of the green recovery.
Thanks ever so much, Rachel, and genuinely hope that you and your team and the wider organisation are incredibly proud of the impact that you had throughout the pandemic, both on your colleagues and on the wider community. So much stuff in there, and I don't think we can overstate how useful that will have been, and really interesting to see now looking ahead that it's not just about recovery, but it's recovery in the right way, in a green way, and bringing as many people as possible with us. So we're now going to invite Angela Jones from Cumbria County Council to give us the regional view of somebody who, from the poll, I know a few of you are in local government, so this will probably be a little bit more familiar territory for you, but to explain what the Cumbria County Council are up to and that relationship with Electricity North West.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. It's an absolute pleasure to be here on a rainy day here in Cumbria. Firstly, a little about me. I think some of you will know me. I'm the Executive Director at Cumbria County Council with responsibility for economy and infrastructure. And that's a wide range of place-based functions such as highways, transport, economy, environment, planning, waste. I also co-chair the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership with Cumbria Action for Sustainability. My presentation is entitled Together We Can Tackle Climate Change. And that's very much what we have to do. We're very fortunate here in Cumbria that we've got a wide range of private and public organisations, community groups, individuals, schools, colleges, the university, many more, all working together collectively to tackle climate change. Success depends on our personal commitments as well as our organisational commitments. It will require a step change in policy and action on the ground. It requires collaboration, which we'll talk about today, and innovation dovetailed with the necessary private and public sector investment. But let's talk about our wonderful county, Cumbria. It's often described as a county of contrasts. It has beautiful landscapes, the national parks, our areas of outstanding natural beauty, lakes, valleys, coastland, uplands and lowlands. But also we have our fantastic towns and villages which are built on rich heritage and culture. Cumbria has a relatively low population for its size. It's the second largest county and the second most sparsely populated. In harnessing all of our assets, our people, our places, our landscapes, we have a very rich and diverse economy. We have international expertise in nuclear and clean energy with world-renowned facilities and experts. We've got advanced manufacturing capability, extensive agricultural land, woodland, peatland. So where's the contrast? The contrast is that we have an economically and socially diverse area with pockets of extreme deprivation, persistent skills shortages, social isolation, an ageing population, which puts demands on our health and social care system, and health inequality gaps. Our beautiful landscape can also be a barrier to many in rural areas, connectivity, digital connectivity, limiting access to jobs, skills, and services. And of course, those beautiful landscapes attract millions of visitors every year, which means we have a very strong visitor economy. But that also puts pressures on our roads and our systems and our communities as well as environmental impacts. But here in Cumbria, we know the impacts of climate change. And unfortunately, we've experienced firsthand the devastating impacts of extreme events, flooding, wildfires, coastal erosion, and landslides. Cumbria is a unique place. We've got strength in our communities, and when events like this happen and incidents, we all come together to work together. And at times of crisis, we draw on those relationships and strengths. But events like this also act as a reminder of our vulnerability. So what's the national context? Well, the UK government and local authorities are very much aligned in our net zero ambitions. The 10-point plan identifies the need for public investment while seeking to mobilise private investment. The government plan has potential to deliver up to £42 billion of private investment by 2030 across energy, buildings, nature, transport, innovation. So what's our headlines? Well, the headlines for government policy is that the UK government target to increase offshore wind by 40 gigawatts by 2030, hydrogen strategy, 50 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen production by 2030, carbon capture, and of course here in Cumbria that's something we're interested in, removing 10 million tonnes of CO2, decarbonisation of transport, which is something that the County Council's leading on with the Local Enterprise Partnership, and protecting and restoring nature and the environment. So the LEP and the County Council and the District Councils are all working together with government to understand what this might mean in Cumbria, because these policies alone are unlikely to be sufficient to deliver our net zero ambitions. We talked this morning about COVID, and for many of you, it's still a very sad and anxious time. But what we do have is a strong recovery strategy, and we have focused our recovery on economic well-being, health and well-being, a green recovery, and building on strong partnerships. The recovery strategy for Cumbria is for the whole of Cumbria. One of the priorities that you'll see in there is about protecting and enhancing our environment, but it's also about a sustainable growing economy for Cumbria. It recognises that net zero carbon can support better public health, reduced inequalities, the environment, and thriving local economies. And we've got a long history of working together to reduce carbon emissions, going back to way before 2009, actually. But in 2019, the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership commissioned a baseline report from Small World Consulting. And this report looked at Cumbria's greenhouse emissions in 3 ways: extraction, production, and consumption. The report provided 5 possible targets to achieve net zero, and it was deemed that 2037 was the most feasible target that could be regarded as being in line with the requirements of the IPCC. This is realistic but challenging. This is because we've chosen to include elements of the footprint that matter most, even though they might be very difficult to achieve to bring to net zero. For example, the inclusion of visitor travel is difficult to decarbonise, but on the other hand, we have a lot of land and land use opportunities, and we'll talk about that in a little while. So we can only do this together, and the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership does have a shared vision for a low carbon Cumbria. It has received funding from National Lottery, 2.5 million, enabling a 5-year programme of action, and it will hopefully make Cumbria the first carbon neutral county. It's community led. We're very much involving young people, and the voice of young people will be important as we progress our plans. And the projects that will come from this partnership tackle some of the main sources of carbon emissions by taking a sector approach, focus on transport, land use, clean energy generation, and in parallel to supporting community initiatives and individual actions. There's a huge amount of organisations that are involved, too many actually to fit on one slide, so we couldn't fit them all on, but here's some of them. There's over 70 organisations, all committed to working together. Clean growth, I've mentioned it a couple of times, and we have a huge amount of capability here in Cumbria. The 2020 Energy Systems Catapult Innovating to Net Zero report found that electricity generation will need to double or possibly triple. Hydrogen will need to grow from a standing start to levels equivalent to today's electricity generation, and success depends on innovation across the whole system. And we've got plenty of innovation here in Cumbria. We're already an internationally recognised centre of nuclear excellence, with the capability of wide-range, large-scale, nationally significant projects, which would contribute to economic growth locally, regionally and nationally. Our natural resources make us a big player in the UK's renewable energy generation. with Cumbria already home to over 20% of the UK wind farm generation capacity. I think many of you will know that we've got one of the largest offshore wind farms at Walney, with a capacity of 700 megawatts, which is sufficient to power 590,000 homes. So we're very much working with the Local Enterprise Partnership and many other partners, including the industry sector, to really develop our clean growth ambitions. The Nuclear Prospectus, which was developed by the Clean Energy Sector Panel of the Cumbria Local Enterprise Partnership, sets out our ambition. It's centred around a clean energy park, drawing upon Cumbria's inherent capability across the industry and our supply chain and academia. The potential is significant. It could contribute to 5 to 7 gigawatts of new low carbon energy through a combination of nuclear, advanced nuclear technologies, hydrogen, and offshore wind. Furthermore, the Moorside site in West Cumbria has been selected as a potential contender to host the first UK nuclear fusion plant. And we're currently waiting to hear from government whether we've been successful, whether we have been shortlisted. And this could act as a catalyst for that wider clean energy plans. But let's talk about transport. As the director with responsibility for transport, I couldn't miss talking about this, and it's very important for all of us, but particularly here in Cumbria, given the rural nature of our county. We're working with the Local Enterprise Partnership to develop a Cumbria Transport Infrastructure Plan, and it's currently out to consultation, so do please have a look on our website and feed in your views. This plan will set our policy framework for transport and connectivity, supporting sustainable and inclusive growth. It sets out a vision for Cumbria to improve, responding to the needs of residents, businesses and visitors, as well as achieving our net zero ambitions. And it very much aligns to work underway under town deals, Future High Street Fund, growth deals, the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal and Levelling Up, and EV charging and vehicle investment. So we know that is a government ambition, and we know that we are working closely across a number of partners to be able to improve the EV charging infrastructure across the county. We're also in the process of developing some exciting plans for a green ferry, and our council on Port of Workington we would really want to see being developed into a green port in the very near future. But through all of this, it's about putting customers at the heart of what we do. So from housing to cycling and walking to transport, public health, skills, education, tackling fuel poverty and inclusive growing economies. Some of you will be aware of the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal, which was formally signed in March 2021. And that brings up to £452 million worth of investment to the Borderlands area. That's the 5 local authorities in the Borderlands region, which includes Cumbria. Within the deal, there's the Natural Capital Programme, and there's also the Borderlands Energy Programme, which will create a strategic low carbon energy master plan, which will help promote much of what we've talked about today, which is about increasing jobs, increasing GVA, delivering our decarbonisation and net zero ambitions. What that will lead to is a series of local energy investment plans, which will provide more detailed analysis on how we will achieve that. And the final phase will be an investment programme, and circa 30 million is available to invest in energy projects across that master plan process. And every effort will be made to secure further funding from both private and public sector to complement and build on the growth deal ambitions. But we had to also look in-house. Local authorities consume over 26 billion kilowatts per hour of energy per year. And that results in carbon dioxide equivalent emissions of 6 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. So, of course, across our estate, we've got our care homes, we've got our offices, we've got our fire stations, our highways depots, and we developed a carbon management strategy across that estate for a 5-year programme. It works on the principle that, first and foremost, we should reduce demand in line with the energy hierarchy. We then should improve energy efficiency within our buildings. We should integrate renewable energy sources. And finally, we should source energy from renewable sources. And we are making some exciting new plans to invest in both solar and wind energy across our estate. The technologies we've identified would be for large off-scale electricity generation, generating up to 1.5 megawatts, but potentially up to 6 megawatts with further in development. So what's our ask of Electricity North West? Well, Electricity North West are very much part of our shared ambition and are a key partner. But our ask can be broken down into 4 themes. To support communities, electricity should be reliable, affordable. We need to take steps to reduce fuel poverty, particularly in those areas of deprivation, to support the energy master planning through the Borderlands master planning and others, and support for energy and efficiency. But also we need our economy to grow. We need it to meet the needs of new homes, businesses and the economy. And decarbonisation, which is why we're here today, supporting our collective pathway to net zero by 2037. We see Electricity North West as having a key role in supporting those ambitions to support electric vehicle charging and meeting some of those domestic needs and local community projects. And it's vital that we have the transmission capacity to drive the net zero carbon ambitions within Cumbria. The current grid does not have the capacity to transmit significant new energy production from within Cumbria. And I talked about those nationally significant infrastructure projects. And there are concerns that there may be network bottlenecks, which will limit our renewable generation and our pace and scale of our delivery. So we ask that Electricity North West continue to work with us, with our partners, with National Grid, to ensure that the necessary transmission capacity can be delivered at pace and in line with our shared objectives. Thank you. I've shared my email if anyone wants to get in touch further. Thanks very much.
Thanks ever so much, Angela. And you described Cumbria as being a county of contrast. And I think from that, it's clear it really is a county of opportunity as well. And we're going to come on and discuss some of those in a little bit more detail. We have seen some questions pop up in the chat, so we're going to have a little look at those as well. And if Angela's well placed to answer, we'll put them to Angela. I do remember, though, to keep popping in questions for Electricity North West generally into that chat, as we will be bringing Paul back towards the end of the session and putting him on the spot for those, or coming back to individually if we've not got the expertise in the room to answer those in the best way possible. We're just going to show you a short video now looking at some of the broader stakeholder engagement that's gone on, and then Angela and I are going to be back to start addressing a few of those questions.
We're looking at probably the greatest moment of transition on our electricity network that we've ever seen. And there are so many areas where the solution seems to be electricity, whether that's vehicles, whether that's changing heating. All of those put an extra demand on your supply. And yet we know already that there are areas where businesses have been trying to expand over the last few years and finding it difficult to get the capacity they need locally. But also businesses are facing a real decision now. They're looking at the stick behind them of increasing electricity prices and how do they cope with that, but trying to decide when is the right moment to move into on-site renewable generation, adoption of new technologies, moving to electric vehicles. So they need a lot of support to understand when and how to go on that journey.
The issue of how we can secure a recovery from the pandemic that is both green and fair is probably one of the most pressing that we face as a city region and as a nation.
I think there is an element of bravery that's required, but to be mindful that the audience that you're talking to, particularly amongst smaller business, is that they are very, very heavily weighed down with debt and other issues at the moment. If there's a way that we can find to help navigate a way through that ends up with a green solution, that would be the ideal.
Be really helpful from Electricity North West actually to understand what their view of consumption looks like in 2030, 2040, 2050, and where the power needs are, whether it's industrial, heat losses, all of that needs to be borne in mind when we decide what to.
West and Cadent, and I think Ofgem will have a job in also allowing them to invest at the pace they need to meet that plan.
Electricity North West future investment plans are significant for our city region. Green growth in Greater Manchester will need to be powered by a reliable and decarbonised electricity network. We welcome Electricity North West's pledge to deliver a high level of customer service for people and businesses across our city region. We also appreciate the additional measures to support customers in vulnerable circumstances, including the £250,000 annual fund to remove barriers that prevent the uptake of low carbon technologies.
If I was to look at any sort of ask of ENW, I would say I know that I deal with the ENW, and I know that they engage in apprenticeship schemes. I know that they engage in upskilling and training their workforce. But it needs to be ramped up, it needs to be much more broadened out, and it needs to be more intensive.
The County Council entered into a collaboration agreement with Electricity North West just over 12 months ago, and since that time we've been working strategically to progress a number of projects, initially with a focus on the enterprise zone at Samlesbury, but the relationship and opportunity extends right across the county as we look to better place strategic sites and anticipate necessary utility and infrastructure requirements which will be needed.
We're going to have to put in for electric vehicles something quite sensitive into Cumbria. We've got to make sure that any data management, any gas network, any coordinated benefit for a greener Cumbria is done at the same time.
And we know the uptake of low carbon technologies like electric vehicles and heat pumps will increase the demand on our electricity network. Timely investment in the North West's energy infrastructure will ensure we maintain a reliable electricity network which will enable our city region to make the transition to net zero by 2038.
Great video there, just showing the scale of people who've really been involved in this so far, and how their thoughts are going to be brought into future plans. I'm just going to spend the next few minutes getting to grips a little bit more with all the really exciting work that's going on in Cumbria. Now, I know a number of you who are watching are involved in the local authority, so you might have a much better handle on this than I do. But certainly when I'm talking to businesses across Cumbria and across the north, and trying to understand what the makeup is, who's responsible for what, how those organisations work together, it can seem a little bit daunting at times. So can you just give us a quick overview of the county, the district and the LEP as being those kind of three key players?
Yeah, absolutely. So the County Council has responsibility for quite a lot of strategic functions like health and social care that I mentioned, children's services, transport, and a wide range of services. What we also have is 6 district councils, and they've got responsibilities for things like waste recycling and residual waste, as well as planning and economic development at a local level and place shaping. Lots of overlaps between the county and the districts. And then we've also got the Local Enterprise Partnership, which is our strategic lead on economic growth. And I've talked about clean energy, and they're very much leading that through the clean energy panel, but they have a huge number of opportunities that are being developed through the Local Enterprise Partnership, working with the private sector and public sector together. To add into the mix, we do have local government reorganisation, which is has been agreed or has been confirmed by government that the County Council and the 6 districts will be replaced with 2 unitary authorities, one west and one east. It's in the very early days, but if as that works through, the new councils would come and be implemented from the 1st of April 2023. So that adds an extra complication, but actually we've always worked well together, and we've collaborated, and we've got great partnership working, and not just with the local authorities, but with lots of other organisations as well. So we hope that that's not going to make any difference at all to our residents and our businesses, who hopefully will see that we'll continue to be working together whilst the local government reorganisation progresses.
Brilliant. Really great to hear, because it is such a challenge in any organisation to do that reorganisation, but at that kind of scale is very difficult. Now, I'm so tempted to ask you to list the 70 organisations, but I'm not going to do that to you. But what I do want to flag up is just the volume of different voices that are involved there. So kind of 70 organisations across Cumbria, 5 councils or district areas looking across the borderlands, but then also through organisations like Electricity North West, working very closely with kind of Lancashire and Greater Manchester, public sector, private sector, third sector. how do you get all of those areas, all of those viewpoints to actually come together and collaborate in a meaningful way?
Yeah, it's a complex picture, isn't it? And certainly in Cumbria, with the two-tier area that I've talked about, it does add a little bit more complexity. The starting point for the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership was that it would be community-led. So you see lots of community organisations in there, and I've talked about the voice of young people, and that's really important, working with schools and colleges to make sure that we are capturing all of those fantastic ideas that our young people have. Net zero, I think, is probably one of the more easier areas that you can collaborate, because I think everybody wants to work together to achieve our ambitions under climate change and net zero. So that's your starting point. You've all got the same objective. What we do still need to work out is who does what. In fact, the county council and local authorities can only really control around 2% of the emissions in their area, but they can influence about a third. So it's about what you can influence, what you can lead, who's effectively responsible. And there's lots of plans and strategies that are being developed, but really for me, it's about the delivery and who's going to be responsible for delivering those on the ground.
Brilliant. It's having that real action focus there, isn't it? If you feel heard and you can see that action being taken, it's much easier to collaborate, and hopefully events like this will really help in that conversation. One of the questions that's come through the chat probably illustrates that quite nicely. We had a conversation in the chat saying around heat pumps, that they're not necessarily going to be cost effective until homes are better insulated. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand housing would generally fit more at a district council level, but presumably is something that you will have some knowledge and oversight in that area.
Yeah, correct. So the district councils generally have responsibility for housing, but the county council has an interest and works with the district councils. And of course, that is such a big topic, isn't it, around the insulation and energy efficiency. And we've got some very old housing stock, some very inefficient homes, and particularly in some areas like in Barrow, where we know that actually huge changes could be put into place from just changing some of the retrofitting or making some of those changes to those properties, including insulation. And that's where Cumbria Action for Sustainability actually comes in as well, because they do a lot of work with communities. So it's not all going to happen with local authorities. It might be through housing associations, it might be through community groups. It's helping residents and individuals make those changes. And even I'm learning in my own house around some of those changes that I can make to reduce my consumption and electricity demand. So yeah, there's still lots of work to do on that.
Incredible. And we will go back in that chat to kind of do like a little bit of signposting there around where people can kind of get extra support. So the organisations that you've mentioned there, which has a load of EV chargers, and it'd be quite easy to kind of think we've cracked it, Cumbria sorted. But again, one of the conversations we're having is, how good is that EV network and that charging network once you come off the motorway and into some of the more rural areas?
Yeah, it's growing all the time, but again, more work to do, because what people have is that range anxiety. It's a very big county. So I always sort of break it down into charging at home, charging in your workplaces, destination charging, and that could be from car parks and, you know, in town centres, but it could also be hotels or even campsites, and then those rapid charging that we've talked about as well. So I think if you break that down, there should be a mixed model. People should be able to charge at home. They should be able to charge from their workplace. They should be able to charge if they come here for the day with their family and visit for the day. So we need to make sure we've got a good range, and finding those pockets and those areas where there isn't sufficient EV charging. That's where I think we can really come together in collaboration. Market will, you know, ultimately lead the way in what's viable, but where it isn't potentially viable, that's where we do need to step in.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's just getting that really clear mapping in the first place, isn't it, of understanding and where those are, and it sounds like you're definitely doing all of that work already. So taking like a little bit of a step back then as to the opportunities for the county, and it's one of the things that I was so pleased when you said it in the chat in the run up to this, because we quite often get that pushback with the green agenda of it's expensive, we need investment, we need these things. But actually from Cumbria's perspective, whilst those things are still there, there's also an opportunity for economic growth, for jobs, to be those centres of excellence. So what are the kind of exciting things coming through in that clean growth space?
Yeah, I talked about it in my presentation. I mean, I think we've got all of that potential and very much the long history with nuclear, for example, and renewables. So we've got a really great starting point, but it does require private investment as well as public investment. I think this is where we need to really understand what could be the barriers to that investment. So, for example, the Moorside new nuclear plant, when that was going to be developed, we did a lot of work about understanding the rail infrastructure, the road infrastructure. So it's trying to get a balance of, you know, building the right infrastructure, but ultimately trying to also achieve our net zero ambition and decarbonise that network as well. So there's some great projects in West Cumbria that are underway, but we've also got this fantastic natural capital, and there's a huge amount underway with tree planting, with peat restoration, and land use will be big for us in Cumbria. So we're working with landowners and farmers to understand what the opportunities might be through environmental land management schemes, for example. And there is funding coming through for green recovery that could act as a catalyst to some of that as well. So we've got opportunity, but we do still have some real challenges and barriers around delivering that.
And I think what you said there is really echoed in a lot of places. Like, we just need this bit to kickstart us in, getting that bit, whether it's public or private. It's then a sustainable industry and will kind of look after itself, but it's getting the right people together and to kind of be able to invest. So from those conversations around collaboration, and particularly around kind of net zero, we know that you all want the same thing. So across the county, across Electricity North West, we all kind of know what we want. But there have been some challenges in the county of potentially Electricity North West being a bottleneck or getting some pushback. And we are going to speak to Paul later on to kind of get some of the picture from behind the scenes, because I think it's such a great opportunity to do that today, to make sure that those conversations are happening publicly rather than sometimes like those issues are solved privately and no one knows what's going on. So what are the challenges particular to Cumbria where you kind of felt actually like we could just do with a bit more from Electricity North West, or we just don't understand why this couldn't move at the pace that we wanted it to?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think sometimes it's a perception of a bottleneck and sometimes it is a bottleneck, and it is about transmission capacity. And we know that some of our major infrastructure will require working with National Grid, and where can we come together with Electricity North West to do that? But we also know that Electricity North West have got a role as well. So I think it's absolutely fantastic. We've got so many plans and projects coming through Borderlands and locally and through the Local Enterprise Partnership. But can we deliver? And can we deliver at pace? And that's the challenge we get from the communities as well that we work with, and through the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership. Can we do this? 2037 is not that long away for us in terms of time. There's a lot to do. And therefore, if there are any blockages, how do we work collaboratively to unblock that? And I think that's about that, injecting that pace and urgency in what we do, but really understanding what they are as a starting point. So, you know, if there are grid issues and capacity issues, well, let's understand that and see how we could work a bit more flexibly, other alternatives. So it's not about stopping what we're doing, but it's just about understanding where it might slow down what we want to achieve, or ultimately could delay something to the point where it's no longer investable, and that would be a real shame for us.
Brilliant. And I think you've broken it down quite neatly there into the few kind of things of being like, is there actually a blocker? And if there is, like, who needs to be involved and what can we do? But also, if the speed of the project isn't right, it might not be viable. And the earlier that you know that, the easier that's going to be. So absolutely, we'll chat through some of those things with Paul later. Do pop on any questions to the chat if you have other things that we want to put forward to Paul later on in the session. We're going to go into a short break now. And after the break, I'll be joined by Johnny Sadler, who is going to talk in much more detail around the net zero plans, both nationally and locally, and how we can achieve those together. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you so much for your high level of engagement over the session so far. We're busy answering as many people as we can on the chat, and as I say, we will keep some of those questions back to put to Paul at the end of the session. We are going to be using menti.com again in the session after this. If anyone's having trouble using it online, do recommend to try using it on the app on your phone. We will read through the answers if anyone's struggling reading some of the smaller print on there. And we're also going to pop the link in the chat to help you open that directly into your browser. But if anyone's having any issues with that, do drop it in the chat, and my lovely colleagues are busy answering your questions as I'm chatting away, and we will go through those polling in the session after this. But first, I'm delighted to introduce you to Johnny Sadler, who joined Electricity North West 3 months ago now, as Strategic Decarbonisation Manager. And we've heard a lot about net zero over the last couple of sessions. Certainly, every time you look at a paper or you go into your online news or social media, like net zero is the thing that everybody's talking about. So no small role whatsoever. Can you try and just summarise as much as you can? I appreciate it's a huge thing to summarise. What's Electricity North West's role in getting the region to net zero?
Sure. Well, firstly, really nice to be with you, Ilona. And this is the start of month 4 for me. So I'm the new boy amongst our speakers today. And I'll maybe just touch really briefly on why did now feel like a good time to come to Electricity North West as a step into what our role is. I've spent a lot of time on partnership and policy development in previous roles, and some of that actually working with Electricity North West colleagues. The bit of the jigsaw that was quite often missing for me was the action bit, which is the crucial part of any policy and programme development. And what I see with Electricity North West as an organisation that not only gets this agenda and takes it really seriously, but is very committed to driving the urgent action that we need to see over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years to get us to net zero in line with the science and the 1.5 degree target. So that's the first thing I'd say. I think we're an organisation that takes this agenda incredibly seriously. And we've got 2 roles. So the first role is the one that you've heard from already this morning, with Clive in particular, talking about the way in which the electricity system has changed, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years. And we've moved from a world where electricity is generated from large power stations around the country. Electricity is transmitted through the national grid and then delivered to the distribution network operators like ourselves, and then we distribute that electricity to homes and businesses. Relatively straightforward, a pretty stable way of doing things, and the way it's worked for a long time. The picture is now a whole lot more complex. So electric vehicles, for example, we had about 12,000 of those on the road in the Northwest last year. That needs to get up to more like 250,000 by 2025, 2.5 million by 2037, and about 3 million by 2050. So that gives you an example of the pace of change you'll see on electric vehicles. And that's a technology that will place increasing demands on our network. You'll see something similar happen with heat pumps as well in the coming years. So the demand for electricity has changed hugely, and on the supply side, the same again. As I mentioned, we have had previously a relatively small number of large power stations across the country. In combination with that, you've also now got much more distributed, localized generation. For example, wind turbines in farms' fields, solar panels on people's homes and rooftops. So electricity is now moving in the other direction into our network. It's not just coming from large power stations, it's coming from local sources as well. What that means for us is that the capacity of our network will need to roughly double between now and 2050, perhaps even a little bit larger than that. So our first job really is the one you've already heard about this morning, which is making sure the network has the capacity our customers need to, when they need to draw electricity from the network, but also where they've got some excess local generation to put into it. And that's the role that all distribution network operators have to play. It's the role that Ofgem regulate us to deliver. So that's a kind of non-negotiable role number one. The second thing we do is also, we think, incredibly important. And we've heard a lot over the last 2 years from our customers as we've been developing the business plan that they kind of get this net zero thing, they kind of get that it's important. But what they're really looking for in the next stage of their journey is much more practical advice and support that helps them understand what are the right technologies for them, how do they develop their ideas into projects, and then most importantly, how do they get them over the line and get their panels on their roofs, get their EV chargers in their car parks, etc. So that second role is one that's not brand new to us. We've been delivering it for the last couple of years, and we'll be doing a lot more of that as we move forward.
Yeah, so it's, as I said, it's not a new role for us. We've been recognised the need for our customers to have support, to understand technologies and actually then get them delivered. So it's a role we've been starting to deliver over the last couple of years, and you'll see a lot more of that from us as we move into the next investment period that Paul's talked about. And at the moment, actually, we have a Powering Our Communities Fund, which is live. £75,000 available to support community groups to develop and deliver community and local energy projects. So those are, in very high level terms, as somebody who's new to the organisation, is how I think about what we do. Sort out the network kind of behind the scenes, if you like, then have a much more proactive role in engaging and supporting our customers to go on their own zero carbon journeys as well.
Fantastic. I feel like that was a bit of a probation meeting for you. It's like 3 months in, explain exactly what we do. And I don't know if you're right or wrong, but it sounded very convincing to me. So I'm going to trust that that is exactly the role that you're playing. And really interesting that you've got that, like, this is our mandated government role that we have to do. And actually, this is how we best support our customers and bring all of those people together. So we've chatted about like what's driving that kind of that net zero agenda, and there obviously is some that is coming from your customers of, you know, like, how do we do this? How do we get involved? But there is national targets, international targets. So where are we at in terms of that national position on the kind of green and net zero agenda?
Sure. So if we go back to 2008 with the establishment of the UK Climate Change Act, what you've seen happen since then is the development of an increasingly well-developed national policy framework to drive and enable action on net zero. And I'll give you a couple of examples of what that looks like. So we've got some sticks in play. We've got things like minimum energy efficiency standards. So domestic and non-domestic landlords can no longer rent properties unless they have an energy rating of at least an E. You are seeing things like clean air zones coming into place. You can't drive certain types of vehicles. So in certain urban areas, Birmingham and Bath already have their clean air zones. Portsmouth will go live later this year. Newcastle and Greater Manchester we expect next year. So there are indications that there will be a number of, if you like, restrictions or sticks that government will use to drive the behaviours that they want to see. But we've also seen a number of carrots come into play, a number of incentives. If you go back to 2010, 1% of the UK's renewable electricity mix came from solar PV, so 1%. 2020, 10 years on, 28% of our renewable electricity comes from solar PV. And that was driven by something called the feed-in tariff, which created a financial incentive for businesses and domestic customers to stick panels on their roofs or any spare land they had and receive a financial benefit for doing so. You've seen something similar through a scheme called Contracts for Difference. So offshore wind now makes up about 22% of the UK's renewable energy mix. Just half of that came online in the last 5 years. So incredibly rapid pace of deployment of that technology. And again, that's because government have introduced a new financial incentive. So that's some examples of what we've seen over the last 13 years. And we are now about to see a whole host of other policy initiatives from national government that are going to drive action. And I think where this gets really interesting for me is when we start to see net zero and climate action as an issue which is no longer slightly over here outside of the more well-established economic and social priorities, and we start to bring it mainstream and say, actually, the reason that we're taking action on net zero is it's the right thing to do from a Paris Agreement and climate science perspective, but actually it can also deliver significant economic and social benefits. You see that baked into the government's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. So 250,000 new jobs by 2030 on top of the 460,000 we already have in low carbon industries. You see it again in the Build Back Better plan from March of this year, where net zero is one of 3 headline objectives. So no longer kind of over there and buried in the appendix, very much right at the heart of what this government are about and what they see for the UK, which is A, doing the right thing on climate, but B, realising those socioeconomic benefits that will come as a result.
Fantastic. And yeah, we spoke about it a little bit in Angela's session about looking for those as economic opportunities. And it is that balance of here's the stick, you can't do this stuff, but actually like here's a reason to do the right thing. Now, it's been reported in the Times this morning that by 2035, we're going fully renewable. What does that actually mean? And we're going to assume for the purposes of this chat that this will be reported later on today, but I'm not going to hold it to you. If that doesn't happen, we're literally going off of what we're seeing reported.
I mean, I think it, for places like Cumbria, what it says is that the level of ambition that we've seen here and that Angela's talked about this morning is absolutely the right one. So actually the trajectory to net zero is about to become even more challenging, but actually I think even more exciting, and it'll be one that delivers even more benefits even more quickly for people. So as Angela said, really close alignment here in Cumbria with what the way that national government have shaped this agenda. Yes, it's one that will see us do the right thing, but it's one which should deliver better jobs, cheaper energy, cleaner air, better quality of life for the residents and businesses of Cumbria. And I think, you know, if we were having this conversation in another bit of the UK or another bit of the world, we might have a bit of a debate about if we need to act. That conversation's been had here in Cumbria clearly a long time ago. You might have a conversation about when's the time to act. That conversation's already happened here in Cumbria. The answer is right now. So I think really the focus here in Cumbria and other bits of the region for us is the focus on action. And that to me is where we've got to go next, working in partnership. And I think the two key ingredients that Angela touched on that I'm particularly drawn to are action, which is right at the heart of your economic strategy. So you're doing it for a whole host of reasons, including delivering economic outputs. And the second thing is partnership. So local partnerships, the Zero Carbon Cumbria partnership will continue to be incredibly important. The LEP will be incredibly important. The work that we do with Cumbria County Council will be important. But I'd very much and always try and encourage local government partners to think about their relationship with national government as well. And you'll see varying different numbers out there, but some of the research I read most recently suggests that something like 14% of a local area's carbon reduction activities can be delivered through local action only. So 14%, 1-4. The other 86% needs to come through either national government action alone or national government working in partnership with local government. And I think given the level of really good alignment we see now with places like Cumbria and national government, now to me feels like a really good time to reach out and say, we share your ambitions, government. We also take this really seriously. We want you to help unlock some of those barriers that we currently face and realise some of the opportunities we've got here in Cumbria, because we're absolutely committed to urgent action and getting to net zero by 2037.
Fantastic. And it's such a great story there, isn't it? As you say, there's like the drivers are all there for like the really strong, like we get the climate change as an issue. We're absolutely committed to doing it. And we can see that from an economic perspective, it's the right thing to do. And that power really does come in the collaboration. So if people are watching now, either within local government, third sector, private sector, wherever they happen to be watching from today, what can they do now? Like we know we need to act now. So what can they do?
Okay, let me give you 4 things. There's a longer list, but let me give
we'll stick with 4.
We'll go with 4 for now. So first one, energy efficiency, and I'll talk particularly about LEDs as one of the technologies that's out there. So for a business, about 40% of your energy demand and energy bill will be associated with lighting. So 40%, a huge chunk. You can reduce that incredibly easily through shifting to LED lighting. We're in the process of replacing all our lights with LEDs at Electricity North West. Our most recent project, we spent about £360,000, and we're going to see a payback of around about 5 years on that technology. So really quite attractive. And you'll talk to some businesses who get down to 2 and 3 year payback periods. So energy efficiency and particularly lighting would be my first one. Second one I would talk about would be solar panels, either on your roof, on your carports, in your field, wherever you've got some space for them. Our first project where we put some solar panels on some E&W buildings saw payback of about 20 to 25 years. We're developing a new project at the moment, which we expect to have a payback of about 10 years. So solar PV looks like an increasingly attractive investment, particularly when you start to talk about the kind of scale that Angela touched on. So can you roll out some big strategic programs of solar PV on social housing, for example? Because when you can do that, you start to bring some economies of scale into play and you start to tip into single figure payback periods. So solar PV going down in cost and the payback periods are looking better and better by the month. So that would be my second one. Third one would be electric vehicles. You will probably already be thinking about an electric vehicle, if not to buy right this moment at some point over the next year or two. We saw in August EVs surpass diesel sales for the 3rd month in a row. We're seeing that EV sales are double this year what they what they were in 2020. And you will find that once you've got an EV, they're much cheaper to run and maintain than a petrol or a diesel vehicle. So if not right this moment, start thinking about your next vehicle, because it will be an EV, and you will find there might be a little bit of a lag between placing your order and getting one. So now's absolutely the time to start thinking about it. And the fourth one, which is perhaps the easiest actually of all of those, is carbon literacy. So if your organisation or your community group, for example, doesn't really quite know where to start on this, carbon literacy is a really great tool. It's a simple, easy to access training course for anybody, any organisation, any individual, to give them the basics in climate change, but then most importantly helps them to start thinking about what they can do to take practical action themselves.
Amazing. Four brilliant tips there that work for all kinds of different scales of businesses. And the carbon literacy one in particular, it's something Elevate became a carbon literate organisation. That's much easier to do when you're 3 people. The work that Electricity North West have to do to get those percentages of staff through really does show that commitment to education and empowering people within the organisation to take that action. So it's been a privilege watching the journey of Electricity North West to go through that, and great to see that interaction with all of the stakeholders. And events that we do today are absolutely at the heart of sharing that knowledge. So thanks ever so much, Johnny. We're going to go into our final session now with Paul, who's going to go into a bit more detail around the business plan. We're going to go then into menti.com, so do have a little play on that if you haven't done it already, and I'll be back to put some questions to him at the end.
Hi, hello again. So what I'd like to talk about now is the future planning that Electricity North West is doing, which is called Rio ED2. You don't really want me to explain why, but that's its snappily named title by our regulator Ofgem. And in thinking forward to the Rio ED2 period, which spans from 2023 to 2028, we are looking to develop a business plan that really drives us into the future and meets the needs of all of our customers and all of our stakeholders in the future. So the stakeholder engagement that I talked about earlier is really focused on this business plan, and hopefully it's been really useful for everybody to have seen the draft business plan that we published at the beginning of July, and we've been getting a lot of feedback on that draft, and we're now in the final stages of developing the final submission, which will be made to Ofgem on the 1st of December. Now, in the draft plan, we highlighted that we would need to be spending £2 billion on the network in the Northwest in this 5-year period. That's a big increase in expenditure for a company of our size, and that is really because of the increased requirements of our customers and stakeholders, new services and support that they want us to provide, and because of this growth in electricity demand coming from the transition to a net zero carbon economy. So a couple of things for me to highlight in this little summary of the business plan, as well as investing 1.35 billion directly into the network within that £2 billion price tag, 300 million of maintenance and repair on the network. We've also got providing the capacity to connect 630,000 electric vehicles by the end of this period and 63,000 heat pumps. So what we're seeing is that electric vehicles are becoming a really big driver of change in our network immediately, and then heat pumps are going to come along after them. I'll come back to some of the details of this business plan a little bit later on. But looking to the final version of the plan, and hopefully building on some of the discussions that we've had in this presentation today, you'll see that the key themes are about net zero, which we spent lots of time talking about reliability, that Clive told you about how well we're performing so far, and the fact that in an electric future, this reliability becomes even more important to all of our customers, and focusing on the customer, giving great customer service and supporting those customers who are in more vulnerable circumstances. And the whole vision for the business plan is about leading our region to net zero. Within the plan, there are headline commitments, net zero for all, fewer power cuts. So we think we can make a 20% further reduction in the number of interruptions that our customers experience and the time that they might be without electricity. Even though our performance is good, we're not complacent. We know that our customers want us to go further, and we can deliver a great customer service, always delivering at least a 9 out of 10 service to our customers and really providing powerful, targeted, focused support for customers in more vulnerable circumstances. I won't go through all the detail, but in this pack, we've included plenty so that people can look back on these slides after the event and read more detail here. So under those 3 headings, we have 10 commitments that we're looking at making, and we're really keen to get continued feedback on those. And those are going to be underpinned by about 50 particular things that our customers and stakeholders have told us they want us to deliver. Now, going forward into this, one of the big pieces of feedback we've had on our draft plan has been, can we put more justification into the plan? So the plan is very much driven by what customers and stakeholders have told us that they want to see us doing. And the challenges we've had back on that have then been, okay, but if that's what customer stakeholders want, what are the costs? What are the benefits? Can we prove that the benefits outweigh the costs? And we're pulling together all of that justification through cost-benefit analysis, through direct customer benefits in some instances, through a measure of social return on that investment. And then the other challenging question that's come back on the draft plan has been, okay, so your customers and stakeholders are willing to pay for this service to be delivered, but is Electricity North West the best placed organisation to deliver on that commitment? And that's a dialogue that we're having now with many of our customers and stakeholders to further explore as we develop the final version of this plan. And that leads us into what we'd like to do on the Menti now. So we'd like to get your opinions, your views on some of these key issues about whether Electricity North West is the best organisation to deliver some of the things that are built into our draft plan. So we'll move on to the Menti. Looking at this Menti, what we're going to focus on are some of the other things on this summary of the draft plan. And in particular, there are a number of funds that I've circled that we've built into the plan. So Johnny's already talked about our Community Energy Fund. That's been incredibly popular, and people have said you should be doing more. So we're looking to increase the size of that fund up to £1 million a year. That's a key question to focus on. We have in place a £500,000 fund to fund referral networks where we get more support for customers in vulnerable circumstances from all of the partner organisations that Rachel told you about that we're working with. So we want to focus in on that area. We're going to be spending about £2 million to support customers in fuel poverty. And that is, again, a key area of focus for this debate. And the final area I wanted to highlight is a technology called Smart Street. Smart Street is a technology developed and pioneered by Electricity North West, which allows us to reduce the voltage at times on the network to enable all of the devices in customers' homes to use a little bit less energy. But over a year, controlling that voltage at an optimum level and dynamically looking at what's being required by our customers enables us to reduce their fuel bills. And we've proven that we can save customers up to £60 a year off their fuel bills. And when you think that the total cost on the average consumer's bill for Electricity North West is about £90, then saving £60 out of that is a fantastic improvement in customer bills. And that's something that we're really keen to do. We're rolling out Smart Street now to 64,000 homes across the Northwest, but we are really ambitious to do more of this. And we've proposed in our draft plan that we would roll this out to a further 250,000 additional homes, focusing in areas where there is an increased level of fuel poverty. So these are some of the key propositions in our business plan that I want to test with you on the Menti. So if we look at the Menti now, what we're going to do is look at some other polling and ask some questions.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm essentially just standing here so that Paul isn't standing here on his own as we go through all of the questions. So final reminder, if you've not yet accessed the poll, go to menti.com. The number is at the top of the slide every time. So if you don't have the code, it's 16 37 85 8. Do you want to read the question and I'll read the answers?
Certainly. Okay, so the first question is, how should the North West region fund support for electricity users in vulnerable circumstances?
So the options that you have are national taxation, local taxation, energy bills, most or all of the above, including energy bills, only those that benefit pay, or something else entirely. So if you choose which one of those sounds most like you, if you could take part in that poll, that would be amazing. We are going to be running this session later this week in Lancashire and next week in Greater Manchester. And it'll be really interesting to see if there's any kind of regional differences between there. If you are putting something else entirely, maybe just drop us something in the chat as well so we know what that is. So far, none of you have taken that option, but always great to hear your ideas. So we're just going to give you another couple of moments to complete that poll.
And hopefully, as you go through now, we're going to ask some other questions about how we fund other things, and all the answers will be the same. So the choice of answers you'll get very familiar with as we go through. We're really looking to see how much of this should be funded through energy bills, including the elements that contribute to your energy bill from Electricity North West, or how much people think there should be another source of funding this.
Fantastic. So we're still seeing a couple of answers come through. So I'm just going to give you a couple of moments. I know there is a slight lag in time, so just going to give you a couple of moments. Oh, we've got something else entirely. Looking forward to seeing this one in the chat. Yeah. Fantastic. So hopefully that's most people who want to answer have had an opportunity to do so. If we could move on to the next question.
So the next question is, how should the North West region fund support for fuel poverty? And the answers
exactly the same. So national taxation, local taxation, energy bills, most or all of the above, including energy bills, only those that benefit pay, or something else entirely. And again, if you've got new ideas, pop those in the chat and we will take a look at those as well. Also, while we're just running through, once we get to the end of this set of questions where we're asking you, it will be my opportunity to put a few questions through to Paul. So if there's anything that you want us to cover, please just drop that in the chat and we will pick those up. But great to see some answers flying through on this one. Quite a split as well.
Yeah, an interesting split. So in the last one, I think we saw that the strongest vote was for taxation and energy bills combined, with a few extra for energy bills. Here we're seeing probably almost exactly a 50-50 split between those who are just saying no, just national taxation, and those who are saying energy bills have a part to play. And that's getting stronger as we get more votes coming through. So that's really interesting for us to see.
Yeah, great to have these figures. And this is the sort of stuff that I say, once we put all those three sessions together, will be really interesting to see some trends there. Fantastic. So hopefully everybody has had a chance to answer. I've not seen it change in the last few seconds. So we'll now go on to the next question.
And the next question is, how should the North West region fund support for connecting electric vehicles and heat pumps to domestic properties?
Fantastic. And hopefully you're now starting to get used to these answers. National taxation, local taxation, energy bills, most or all of the above, including energy bills, only those that benefit pay, or something else entirely. So a little bit of a longer question, and maybe one that people need to give a little bit more thought to. I think the last one, there was like quite a strong coming through straight away. So do take your time, have a little read through. If it doesn't fit into one of those categories and it's something else, again, just let us know what that might look like. But yeah, definitely seeing more of a spread coming through here, and definitely a little bit more thought going into what your position might be.
Yep, and now more votes coming in for all of the above, and that split. And then this is the first time I think we've seen a stronger vote for only those that benefit pay, and that can be understood in relation to the the connection of electric vehicles and heat pumps. And there's
Absolutely.
a split there as to how we encourage those technologies to be adopted, and how do we ensure that, you know, we have a fair transition to net zero. How do we ensure people who can't necessarily afford those technologies get support to connect them? Because, as Johnny was saying, eventually everybody is going to be relying on technologies like this for their everyday lives.
Absolutely. So I think that's most of the answers through now. It doesn't seem to be jumping. So should we go on to the next question?
Next one, very similar. So this is, how should the North West region fund support for connecting electric vehicles and heat pumps again, but this time to small and medium-sized businesses?
And again, your answers are national taxation, local taxation, energy bills, most or all of the above, including energy bills, only those that benefit pay, and something else entirely. And as Paul pointed out, very similar topic to the last question, but where that focused on domestic use, we're now in that small and medium-sized business, which is most businesses, I think is fair to say, will fall under that category. So just seeing the first couple of votes come through now. I think that might be the first vote we've had for a local tax so far.
I was going to say, local taxation is starting to have a feature. Angela will be interested in all of this kind of stuff. She's sat in the back of the room over there and paying close attention to all these votes as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and getting much more of a range coming through here, which is, really interesting to see. Still a couple of votes coming through, so we're just going to give you another few moments. Wonderful. Okay. That seems to be it for votes. If we want to move on to the next question.
Yeah, and how should the North West Region Fund support for helping the more vulnerable in society also benefit from the net zero transition? So we've already asked a question about general support for the more vulnerable, but when we think about the net zero transition, do we have a bit of a change there? Is that still something that should be driven by national taxation, or because it's a net zero and energy focused thing, is that something where you'd expect a different role for Electricity North West to play, for example?
Absolutely. It's really bringing those two streams together of helping the vulnerable and that kind of green recovery that we've spoken about. And so hopefully you're all used to your answers by now, but yeah, national taxation, local taxation, energy bills, most or all of the above, including energy bills, only those that benefit pay, and something else entirely. And I think we can see this is looking much similar to the question we had around vulnerable customers earlier on.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that split, and just two options so far being considered by people who are looking at this out there at the moment.
Absolutely. It is, of course, Conservative Party conference at the moment, so maybe we need to be sending them these national taxation slides, a little something for them to add to the agenda.
Looks like we're nearly there for votes on this one.
It does indeed. If we can move on to the next question.
Okay, and I think this is the final one in this set. So how should the North West region fund support for community energy projects? So as we talked about, we've got this idea of increasing the size of our fund, but other people might have different views for that. So community energy, how should that particularly be funded?
Fantastic. Clearly, you're all getting to grips with the answers now because they're coming through nice and fast. But national taxation, local taxation, energy bills, most or all of the above, including energy bills, only those that benefit pay, or something else entirely. I feel like since I started telling people that needed to go in the chat, they've disregarded something else entirely because they have to come up with the plan. Great. So a really broad split coming through there for the community energy projects. So I'll just give you a few more moments there. And then when we go on to the next set of questions, there is a slightly different set of answers. So if we get this one through, there's just another couple of votes coming in. We'll then talk you through the answers in full to the next question.
Okay, quite a strong vote for a sort of all of the above with a role for energy bills to play in that one. So
absolutely, really strong mix there.
I think that's quite encouraging. Oh, and another final vote sneaking in at the death there as
the
well.
Last minute, amazing.
That'll be great for Johnny and his colleagues to look at.
Fantastic. So if we could move on to the next question.
Okay, and as we said, we're going to slight change of tack for this next set of questions. So do you want to see Electricity North West working with and funding partners in Rio ED2 to deliver services to electricity users in vulnerable circumstances. So having got that broad thought about should this be energy bills or should this be taxation, we're now homing down to say, okay, if it is energy bills, do you think it's Electricity North West to be doing this and creating the funding to spend with its partners? So not all of this will be delivered by ourselves, but we have this strong network of partners. We're building it all the time, and there are a number of different things that we can fund. So
fantastic.
Yeah,
and your answers there. So yes, as shown in the draft plan. No, it's not Electricity North West job to do this. Or I don't have enough information to express an opinion. And that might feel like that's not an answer you need to tick. You might feel like if you don't know, you're just not going to answer. But actually, if you're not answering because you haven't got the full information you need, really good thing for us to highlight, because it means we can look at sharing out more information. Again, that chat function is still live. So if you don't have enough information, but there's something critical that would help, flag it up in there, because we can do a little bit to signpost that information. But essentially, yes, as it is in the draft plan, no, it's not under Electricity North West remit, or you need more information. So it's looking fairly strongly in the yes column at the moment.
A lot of support for what we've put in so far. That's great. Shall we move on to the next one?
Just one last vote sneak through, but there we go. On to the next question.
Okay. Do you want to see Electricity North West working with and funding partners in ED2 to deliver services to electricity consumers in fuel poverty? And that is, again, something that was built into our draft plan. In the draft plan, we had this £2 million per annum funding to support our partners who are helping address fuel poverty.
Yeah, and as we said before, if it's something that you don't feel there's enough information, please do flag that up with us, because it gives us an opportunity to make sure that we get that information out there. But the numbers, as with the one before, do seem to be looking that we're getting it right in the draft plan, and I think that probably does come down to the amount of consultation that's already gone on. This is very much a part of an ongoing conversation. Conversations have been going on for a long time. That feedback's been incorporated, and off the back of these events and others, that will continue to change. So really good to see that plan seems to be on the right track. A couple more not enough information's coming through, and so absolutely, if there's critical information that you would like to have, please do drop that in the chat, and we can either address it later or pop links in the chat for you.
Okay, shall we move on to the next one?
I think we can move on.
Okay, so very similar question again, but here we're saying, do you want to see Electricity North West working with and funding partners in Rio ED2 to deliver services to help the vulnerable benefit from the net zero transition?
Absolutely. And as before, yes, as in the draft plan, no, it's not Electricity North West job, or you don't have enough information to express an opinion. So seeing these answers coming through quite quickly now, there's significantly less options than there were in the first round of questions. So hopefully easy for people to make a call on this. Do appreciate it's a longer question than some of the ones we've had before. So I don't know if it's just worth you reading that out one more time for people who are having a look at it.
So here we're focused on the net zero transition and providing services to support the vulnerable and ensure that they can benefit. So making sure that the net zero transition is not just focused upon those most able to take the advantages from it, but that everybody in society is getting the ability to benefit from this net zero transition as we go forward.
Fantastic. And those numbers seem to have stayed static for a few moments. So I think we can move on to the next question.
Great. And this one is, do you want to see Electricity North West working with and funding partners in Rio ED2 to deliver services to community energy projects? So again, community energy projects is something that we've talked about. We have a small fund at the moment, which is helping projects every year. And a lot of our stakeholders have told us we could do so much more if we could increase the size of that fund. So we proposed in the draft plan a £1 million per annum fund there.
Fantastic. And we can see those answers coming through already. So again, seeing strong support for yes, as shown in the draft plan, an option to say no, it's not Electricity North West job to do that. And then also that final one, if you don't have enough information and if you can highlight what information you might need, that would be very useful. So coming through nice and quick now. People are getting the hang of this. We're flying. So just another couple of votes coming through there. So we'll just give it a moment.
That's really good. lots of strong support for us to be doing the things that we've put into our plan all the way through on these questions, and very little on no, it's not our job to do this. So that's powerful feedback for us and for some of our other stakeholders who've commented on the plan. Shall we move on to the next question? So this one is, do you want to see us, Electricity North West, working with and funding partners during this RIIO-ED2 period to reduce bills by changing network voltage to improve the efficiency of devices? So this is the smart street technology that we've developed here in Electricity North West. We're rolling it out now in our current period to 64,000 customers, and then we want to do another 250,000 customers in this ED2 period, and that's our ambition, limited really by the maximum number that we can deliver in that period.
Fantastic. And again, seeing a strong support there for yes, as shown in the draft plan. Do have the option of saying no, it's not Electricity North West job, or to let us know if you require any further information. But probably the strongest yes vote we've had so far.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Balancing things out.
That's great. So we'll just give chance. There's a few more people who voted on the other ones who haven't expressed an opinion yet.
So yeah, just see a couple of last minute votes coming through. So again, it's, do you want to see Electricity North West working with and funding partners in RIIO-ED2 to reduce bills by changing network voltage to improve the efficiency of devices? And I think that's most of our votes through. If we want to move on to the next question. Is that the end?
That might be the end.
There we go. Last question. So thank you ever so much to all of you for participating in those. Really, really interesting to get that feedback, to be able to take it back internally within Electricity North West, but also to partners. So we are going to move now into this kind of final Q&A stage. So my colleagues on the chat are going to be sending me through curated versions of these questions for me to be able to put through to you as they come. But the first question that I think we'd really like to address is that really regional issue that Angela brought up, because she said it's really important that that conversation happens in public and everybody understands. So what Angela and her team across the region have seen is their pace that they want to see, the ambition that they have for the region. It's so exciting and everyone's behind it that there's an element of frustration when it's somebody Electricity North West is like, no, we can't do it, or we can't do it at that speed. Can you give us a little idea as to what the landscape is behind that might drive some of those bottlenecks or other kind of changing priorities?
Sure. So during this current RIIO-ED1 period, we have seen enormous growth in distributed generation, as we call it. So that's solar PV, wind turbines, renewable generation in the region connecting to our network. That growth has outstripped our forecasts at the start of this period. And that's been a great success. We've been delighted by how much energy generation we've been able to connect into our network. And it's becoming a really significant part of the national energy mix, as Johnny was saying earlier. Going forward, there's more ambition to do lots more. But Cumbria and the Cumbrian ring that Clive described in his presentation is becoming full for generation. Particularly at the points where it connects into the national grid, so that this power can be taken from Cumbria and exported around the rest of the country to where maybe there are other regions that don't have as many renewable resources. So we're working with National Grid to increase the capacity at those connection points between our network and their network, but there are other things that we can do now to speed up the connection. So there is a bit of a queue at the grid, but there are things that we can do to connect people now to be ready when more capacity comes around. So there are flexible types of connections that we can put in place, and that is supported by the investment we're making in our network management system. And there are new technologies that we can deploy that maybe allow people to generate electricity during the day, store that in a local battery, and then export that onto the grid at night when actually the flows of energy down the grid are lower and that capacity is available. So by working together with people, we can find ways of making projects go ahead today and being ready for when more capacity that we're driving into the national grid comes along later.
Fantastic. And yeah, that point about collaboration and communication has come over and over again today. But yeah, understanding what's a national grid issue, are there a different way that we can approach it so that where possible, it's not a blanket, no, we can't do that. It's just we might need to change how. Fantastic. So I do just have a question here around decommissioning of nuclear. So how engaged is Cumbria in particular and Electricity North West in using the land being released by the decommission of nuclear? And would that give us additional grid capacity?
Well, it's not necessarily the land, but definitely the nuclear capacity and the generating capacity of old nuclear stations that are being decommissioned in the Cumbrian region is providing capacity. We released an enormous amount of capacity several years ago with the full decommissioning of the Calder Hall reactor site, and that I think gave us about 500 megawatts of additional capacity on the Cumbrian ring. The good news really is that actually all of that capacity has been taken up by renewable energy. So that is great to show that amount of growth that's coming on. What I do envisage maybe coming on in the future is that some of that land around those nuclear decommissioning sites may be prime locations to site more generation. It's easy to connect it into the network there because of the existing connections infrastructure that was already in place. So that reduces the cost of connecting it, and we can get that power away as we increase the capacity on the network there. So some really great prospects for development of those sites.
And it is that theme again that keeps running through. It's just those opportunities are there, that there is actually, there's definitely difficulties and challenges, but there's some really exciting opportunities. I've had another conversation come through on the chat. So could you share any examples of when you've taken a flexibility first approach to designing larger connections, for example, electric vehicle fleet depots or similar?
Yes, in fact,
Is that it? Yes, I can.
Yes, I can think of an example. No, what I was trying to think of something that's relevant or that people have heard today. I remember from Angela's presentation, she talked about the green ferry coming across Windermere. Now that ferry is going to be electrically powered, and it needs to recharge really quickly as it comes into dock, and the cars cars discharge and load back up. It needs to get fully charged before it heads back across the water. So at small periods of time, we need a very high electricity demand to charge the ferry. At the same time, we're also connecting lots more EV chargers in car parks in Windermere to support the visitor economy. And what we're doing is integrating the ferry charging and the EV charging in a flexible way, in Electricity North West providing the technology to do that, so that as the ferry charges, the EV chargers switch off, but it's only for a short period of time. The ferry then undocks and moves across the water. The EV chargers come back on again. And by combining the technology in that really flexible way, that enables us to get all of those requirements and new connections going quickly. And it allows us to do that without saying, well, actually, we don't want to take a risk here. We'd like to put a lot more infrastructure in place first. So it enables us to move forward in a quick way by combining different loads and putting extra technology on the network.
Incredible. And such a lovely balance there is it really gets back to the customer, that it's like if you're charging your car and it's not there for a very short period of time, you probably won't even notice. But if you're sitting there waiting for a ferry to move, you absolutely do. So yeah, great to get that kind of customer involved in the journey. So next question that's come through, are Electricity North West doing any work on V2G, so that's vehicle to grid, where EVs can act as distributed grid storage batteries?
Yes, we are. We are working with all of the other distribution network operators across the country. So we provide the network for the northwest of England, but there are 13 other networks that cover the rest of Great Britain. And all of us work together in a central project that involves our regulator and involves government, called Open Networks. And through Open Networks, we're looking at how we develop all of these technologies. I think vehicle to grid has an enormous potential to create a battery location for us when those vehicles are static. How can we get more benefit from the investment that all of our customers are making in their own EVs? So that technology is developing. It's essential that is coordinated on a national level, and that you get the same experience whether you drive south down to London or you drive north up to Cumbria, you've got to have the same experience and the same regime for utilising that vehicle to grid technology. So it's something that needs to be coordinated on a national level. And all of the commercial arrangements and as well as the technology arrangements are being looked at through that Open Networks project, but it has great potential for the future.
Brilliant. And another great example of having that real kind of collaboration. So talking about, this follows on quite nicely from having that same experience regardless of where you are in the country. What would Electricity North West be doing to support rural businesses and households around improved grid reliability?
Okay, yes. So Clive talked about the reliability improvements that we've made over the last few years. And we're really proud of that, because when you look at the Northwest as a whole, our reliability now is second only to the centre of London. So even though we're providing a service for somewhere as rural as Cumbria, for the whole of the Electricity Northwest region, it's a real world-leading performance. But we know that actually, if we're honest about this, the performance of our network in the centre of Greater Manchester is much better than the performance of our network in Cumbria. We're not trying to hide that from anybody. So in our draft business plan that we're looking to finalise now for the ED2 period, we've built in some particularly targeted investment to create a sort of levelling up of performance across the Northwest region, which involves more investment in the reliability of the network in rural locations like Cumbria. So that's a really significant £40 million investment programme that we're proposing to do, as well as continuing all of our business as usual approach to improving the reliability of all of the assets that serve us all and improving the service for all of our customers. So we'll be reducing the number of power cuts that happen, if they do happen, using technology to fix them really quickly and mobilising all of our people where there's a bigger problem to get out there and fix it super fast.
Wonderful. I'm going to give you a very short break from answering questions, but don't go anywhere because we might have another couple come through. So just let people know who are watching, we will be sending out a feedback survey, and we're going to include the link to that in the chat. So please do give us your feedback. We'd love to hear it from your perspective and also to be able to engage in conversations. But as I say, we are also running another 2 of these. So if there's things that we can do differently in those, feel free to flag those up as well. The final plan is being submitted to Ofgem on the 1st of December. So if you do want to get in touch, if you've got any comments that you want to raise directly with Electricity North West, you can do that at stakeholderengagement@enwl.co.uk. That has already been shared in the chat, but we will pop that in again for you, and we'll include it on the email that we send out after this event. So I think we've got one last question to come back to you with. So can you share the expected increases in domestic demand for electricity as EV home charge increases and domestic electricity use in heating, such as home pumps? How will the infrastructure cope with that increase, and what are the plans in place to deliver this infrastructure?
Wow, okay, that's a really big question.
So I just thought we'd end on an easy one, but essentially, if demand's going up, how are we going to cope and what's the infrastructure?
So demand is definitely going to be rising, and our expectation is that not only will demand rise, but the amount of demand at peak times will rise, and it's that peak time increase that affects our network, and we have to design for. So we have to be able to meet the peaks. We think that the amount of energy we'll be putting through our network will double by the time we get to 2050. But we're not planning to double the size of the network, because the bill for that to put onto everybody's energy bills is enormous. The electricity network we've got out there across the northwest of England at the moment, if we had to replace it all, looking at 12 to 13 billion pounds. And that's not a bill we think we should be forcing on anybody. So we need to use our network that's already there in a smarter way. We need to get more out of the existing network, as well as adding capacity in the right places that remove bottlenecks, such as the bottlenecks we've talked about around the Cumbrian ring. So that's the way we're developing the network. We are seeing, as I said, probably over 600,000 electric vehicles connected to the network by the end of this RIIO ED2 period. So we are going to go into a period where we're spending a lot more on the network, providing a lot more capacity. And we expect our capacity to provision expenditure to probably double. from what we're doing now as we move into the ED2 period, and we're already on a ramping curve. So we're spending more every year on capacity provision, but we're trying to make sure that that's targeted. We're trying to make sure that that is really driven by, it came out one of your questions, a flexibility first approach. So we don't want to put new infrastructure under the ground or over the ground, on the ground, where we could actually use flexibility instead. And a lot of people connected to our network, businesses and customers, have some flexibility in their demand. So if we can get that flexibility to avoid that peak generation point, maybe moving electricity distribution through time, so that people, you know, use electricity, use their devices at the parts of the day when the demand is lower, then that saves us from having to increase the capacity. So using flexibility is one of the ways in which we'll provide more capacity, but avoid that bill of doubling the electricity network. And that's what we've got going forward. But even with that flexibility first, we are looking at probably an additional 100 to 200 million pounds solely on capacity provision alone in the ED2 business plan. Now, for people who want to get more information on that, we publish every year our future energy scenarios, which look out and chart through time how electricity demand is going to change. And there's some really great heat maps within some of those publications that pick out regions like Cumbria or Lancashire or Greater Manchester, focusing on those regions and show how that's going to change over time. So the DFES, as we call it, or the Distribution Future Energy Scenarios, is the repository for all the detail that really answers the question that you're
Fantastic. Great answer there, high level, but if you want detail, this is where you can go and find it. But I think what's really key to take away there is it's not about rebuilding, it's not about doing that, it's about looking at what have we got, how we can use it in the best way possible, and then make sure that investment is really targeted. And the best use of what is essentially at some point public money, whether it's on your bill or through taxations. Amazing. So thanks ever so much, Paul, and huge thank you to all of our speakers today. And again, an absolutely massive thank you to all of you for joining, for engaging in the voting, for engaging on the chat. This is absolutely just a part of the conversation that Electricity North West wants to have. So please do come through the email address that we shared, fill out the feedback survey, hunt down the extra information on the website. We've included some links on the site that you're on at the moment to view this, and flag up where and when they are able to help. So that's it from us today, and look forward to hearing more about what we can do in Cumbria.
Get in the door, silent walk was the first to speak. Speaking like a real freak, voice in my head, in my bed, filled with you instead. Taking your time, work my mind, and I'll play with you. And play pretend it's all true. Follow me down, listen round to that deep dark sound. Don't doubt me, babe, you make me wanna change.